Let's get to what could be kind of an interesting matchup. Illinois obviously coming over a big win, though. Can you really say that these days when you beat Michigan? I still don't understand why Washington stormed the field, but hey, do what you want to do. Illinois traveling to Oregon. This is going to be the 3:30 p.m. CBS game. No, it's not going to be. I see I made an error in the thing now. It's not going to be at whatever that is that I typed in the thing earlier today, military time or whatever. Mute the TV for this one because it's got the two guys calling it that I personally think are kind of checked out at this point. They did the Illinois Michigan game last week, and it wasn't necessarily great. JR, what are your thoughts? Can Illinois keep this game any kind of close, or is Oregon the new number one team in the country in the AP poll, if I'm remembering right, by the way? Are they just going to do to Illinois what they did to another Midwestern team in Purdue last week?
Yeah. First off, on the commentators, CBS did do a good job with the production of that Illinois game, but you're exactly right. Gary Danielson, he misses the SEC so much. He's like getting ready to quit right now if the Big Ten is back next year, which they are. So sure, Gary Danielson, move on. Let's get Jake Butt or somebody who's actually a good color analyst in there. So or a play-by-play analyst in there. So yeah, so this game's really interesting to me, this Illinois-Oregon game. I kind of wish it was at Illinois. I think that there would be a little bit of a more interesting game. If I'm not mistaken, Oregon has started like 20-point favorites. That seems a little high to me. I guess I could see the game getting out of hand and Oregon getting up by more, but at the end of the day, like,
sorry to interrupt you. Oregon is a 21.5 according to ESPN right now.
21.5. Yeah. So I figured they were up there somewhere by 20. But yeah, for me, like a lot of this comes down to Illinois' offensive line, because we saw what Oregon's defensive line and Derek Harmon was able to do to Ohio State's offensive line, which has been a pretty good offensive line this year. I know that they didn't really face too many great defenses, but Iowa was a good defensive line that definitely did well against Michigan State in that game. So, they're a better defensive line than I think some people give them credit for. So Ohio State did have a track record of doing pretty well. But it's really going to be a big test for them in this one. If they're going to want to be able to run the ball with Josh McCray and some of those other guys, they're going to have to be able to get some push up front. You don't really have with Caden Fagan out. I think he's out for the season. If not, he's been out for a while.
I knew he was out, but yeah.
I don't remember if it's out for the season or just for a good amount of time. But yeah, without him, you really don't have too many running backs that are playmakers to be able to, get over a bad blocking offensive line. And if Oregon's able to get through the middle of that offensive line, it's going to be a long day for Illinois trying to run the ball. I do think Luke Altmaier has some more mobility than people give him credit for. He was, like I said, he was able to run the ball pretty well against Michigan and pick up yards when they needed to. And so he does get out of the pocket pretty well. So I do think they have that going for him. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to come down to Illinois' wide receivers. Are they really as good as some of us think they are? I think they're very good. I think Zachary Franklin, Pat Bryant are two of the best duos, not only in the Big Ten, but I think you could argue they're top 10 in the country, even possibly. So for me, that's a very good duo, and they're going to have to show it against this Oregon secondary, because this Oregon secondary, even though I do think they're really good, they're also kind of smaller like Indiana's is. So if you're going to be able to capitalize on that, you're going to have to run to the outside, let these guys block those quarterbacks, and then you're also going to have to throw the ball outside the numbers and hope those guys can come up with it.
They are smaller, but I will say Jabbar Muhammad is a very physical corner, so that'll be an interesting matchup. I would think that he'll get put on Pat Bryant more often. The other interesting thing I find in this game is Illinois is still running a lot of the same defensive scheme stuff that I'm blanking on his name. Ryan Walters ran over at Purdue, who Oregon just played last week and absolutely boat raced. If Illinois comes out in a lot of like man coverages and not really disguising anything, they disguise a lot more now, a hell of a lot more now than they did when they had Ryan Walters' defense in there. But I feel like, especially if they try to man up specifically on those wide receivers, it could be a bad night for them, or a bad day for them, or whatever time it is. I'm completely still thrown off by that error I made typing that thing in the thing down there. But yeah, does Oregon get Birch back for this game? Have you heard anything on that? Because if they get Birch back, especially talking about Illinois' offensive line, that could be really not great for them in this game. Oregon already has, like you said, Derek Harmon. Uiagalelei is a good defensive end. I don't think he's like an eye-popping like first-round talent or anything like that, but can be a really great defensive end in this game, especially if they get Jordan Birch back. That would be huge.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to listen to Dan Lanning's comments today to the press, and he's normally doesn't give a whole lot of comments and doesn't give a whole lot of injury updates. Sounds like he really hates his press, but which not every head coach does, so I get it. But yeah, I haven't heard anything, and I haven't heard anybody really mention it. Most of the stuff coming out of Oregon has still been the the talk about the last game and stuff that went well there and stuff like that. So I'm sure there'll be mentioned later on in the week, but yeah, I haven't heard if Jordan Burch is back yet.
Yeah, we'll probably hear about it, especially considering today is only Monday. We'll probably hear about it
Yeah.
more going on. But yeah, I honestly, the way I lean in this one, I would honestly not be surprised if Oregon covers in this one. I know it's a huge point spread, but Illinois, weird thing going on in the Big Ten so far this season outside of USCing, if we can use that as a verb, against Penn State. Not many teams making the cross country trek and winning games, and I don't see Illinois even having much luck in this one. I think Oregon's defense is still somehow pretty underrated. They just have athletes and great players at all levels. They got Jeffrey Bassa back. Bryce Betcher is a really great like throwback off-ball linebacker that can also like cover a little bit. He reminds me a little bit of Jack Campbell from Iowa a few years ago. Just like a great defense at all three levels. And I don't, like you said, Luke Altmaier's got some running ability. They've got Pat Bryant, but it seems like you need a lot more than just a couple of great players on your offense. And speaking of, we saw what Oregon was able to do, slowing down Ohio State a few weeks ago with the just litany of offensive weapons they have. So yeah, it'll be interesting in that one. Do you have any final thoughts on that one before we get to our next preview here?
Yeah, final thought is just I think you're right. I think Oregon, if they don't cover, they're close to covering in this one. Just I mean, it's at Oregon. This is going to be a long trek for Illinois. It's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate for Illinois. But at the end of the day, this is the number one team in the country in Oregon, and there's a reason why. I think that their defense is also underrated. I really agree with that. And I think one of the secrets to it is they're a really good tackling team. Tackling is something that we're seeing become kind of a lost art in college football right now because you have so many teams worried about injuries and stuff in practice, so you don't see them tackling as much. But Oregon, between Bassa, Bocher, and even their defensive line, they tackle very well also, and their safeties are doing a good job tackling. So, I mean, when you look at college football, tackling is down overall, so they're not the perfect tackling team by any means, but when you look at the rest of college football, they actually do a pretty good job of it. So it's definitely something they have in their favor, and I don't think Illinois has the make you miss kind of guys to really battle with that. And
like you said, Caden Fagan might be the most make you miss guy on that offense, and he's not going to play. So, yeah, people forget too. I think it's a bit of a brand bias thing. We always think Oregon, we think high flying offense, and what do you call it? Finesse play. But this is a Dan Lanning defensive minded team. It is. Yeah. Good points as always.